Great to be here with you today. I want to carry on with our series on the Victorious Church, looking at how we can live with hope and with joy in the face of whatever circumstances we're facing at this time, whether it's COVID related or it's illness, or it's, as Meg reminded us last week, it's about loneliness or isolation or separation from friends and family. How can we live with joy and with hope in these current times? And today I want to look at the ultimate victory that we have, which is the victory when, as Jesus promised, that he will return to renew and restore his whole creation, and what that means for us in our current circumstances, and how we can see that and prepare and be ready for it. There are two dates I'd like to log in your minds. The first one, I'm sure, is in your minds, is the date at which you get your first or your second, for those who've already had it, COVID-19 vaccination. That's a date that I'm sure is important to you. And the other date that I want to make important to you is the date of the Beacon Church Alpha course, which starts next Wednesday at 7:30 and runs for a few weeks after that, every Wednesday at 7:30. And I would love you to be able to come on that and to register for that and come along. So we'd love you to find out more about this Jesus that we are crazy about. So today I want to look at parts of Matthew's Gospel, quite long sections of Matthew's Gospel, and Matthew takes two chapters to record, chapter 24 and 25, to look at some of the what Jesus said about various future events, and particularly about his final return, what we call his parousia, his presence with us following his death and resurrection and ascension to Father, and so it's his return and the ultimate victory when he returns as Lord of Lords and King of Kings. Now, I'm not going to deal with when that's going to happen or how it's going to happen, because, to be honest, I don't know, and I think it's more important that Jesus throughout is saying in these couple of chapters, he's really saying it's not about when, it's about what you do now. It's about how prepared you are at this time in light of that future event. So let's start and have a look at what we need to do to be ready for Jesus returning again. One of the first pictures that he gives us is that he says in chapter 24 and verse 37, he says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. And in the story of Noah, which is a well-known Bible story in the book of Genesis, that God sort of speaks to Noah, and Noah actually believes him and believes what he's saying, and starts to build a boat because he believes that the flood is coming. His neighbours were carrying on as normal. They were getting married. They were doing all the normal things that people do, but they had no regard to the future. Whereas Noah was different. He believed what God said, and he built an ark. And his neighbours probably thought he was crazy at making that decision. And I remember years ago when I first became a Christian, when I was about 22, I think, and I had to make a decision to follow Jesus. And that decision would have was different. It was going a different direction to my friends at that time, and they probably thought I was crazy for doing that. I've still got those friends, but they think slightly differently sometimes to the way I think about things, and they probably still do think I'm a bit crazy, and they don't always sort of understand where I'm coming from. But I think it's important that it's, as with Noah, that we are different. We think differently, and we sometimes have to behave differently as well. And I would encourage you on that and say, don't be put off, for example, on going on Alpha. Be determined, be different, and really do consider going on Alpha and seeing what it's like, even if your family and friends might think you're a bit crazy. I had to explain to my parents that I was going to church, and they didn't really understand it. But we need to persevere on those things. So I'd encourage you to push through on that, as Noah did. And the other thing, the next thing Jesus says, he says, beware of burglars. Beware. He says, if the owner of a house, in verse 44, he says, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. Now, when I grew up, my family, we didn't really lock anything. We didn't lock the doors. The key was in the front door. The cars were normally open on the drive. I'm not going to tell you where they live, but because they still behave in that way, most of my family. But when I moved up to where I live now, up here in Chertsey, I do regularly take precautions against burglars. I lock the doors. I lock the doors at night. I lock the doors when I go out, just so you're aware if you're inclined to burgle. But I've taken precautions, and Jesus is saying here, he says, you need to be aware of these things might happen, and take precautions and think about these things, because it is important that you think about them. And again, that's one of the things about Alpha, is it gives you opportunity to think about these things. And it's also that burglars seem to take things away, and quite often we can be open to having our thinking stolen from us, the things that are precious to us, the thoughts that are precious to us, stolen away from us. And Jesus talks about the parable of the sower, and how things sometimes, ideas land on people, seed lands on people. It doesn't always bear fruit because it is stolen away, it is taken away, and we must guard against that. And if you're a follower of Jesus already, then it's really important that you have daily habits of reading His Word, of praying, of understanding what it is He's saying to you at this point in time, and of waiting and listening to Him and hearing what He's saying. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, then going on Alpha is a good way to try and hear what He's saying, and to sort of secure His thinking in you, to secure how He thinks about you within you at this time. So I would encourage you to do that as well. There's another parable Jesus tells, which he says, it sort of talks about one of the servants, and he says the servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants to eat and drink with drunkards. And one of the objections that we have to Jesus talking about promising that He will return is that people think it's a long time, and therefore they can ignore it, and therefore they can go off and do whatever they like. And a lot of these parables in these verses in chapter 24 and 25 talk about the master being away a long time. But the long time is not the issue. The long time away is not the issue. The long time away is actually a cause of grace and of love. Peter, the Apostle Peter, in his letter to the churches, says this. He said, the Lord is not slow in keeping His promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. Now, his desire, the God I worship is a loving God who wants that all should come to Him. And there's things in every generation almost that people can point to, and God is sort of prompting us. We need to hear these things that He's almost shouting at us about in the COVID situation, for example. and he is wanting us to come to know him. He's wanting us to come to understand what he's like, and to understand how we can sort of engage with him and follow him, and because his way is the best way, and he's full of love and grace. The God I worship is full of love and of grace, and he wants everyone to come to a knowledge of the truth. And that's, again, I'll stress, that's why we're putting on an Alpha, so that you have the opportunity to come and see what God is like. Matthew goes on at the start of Matthew 25 to really focus on the fact that we can't live off borrowed faith. He talks about 10 bridesmaids at a wedding, and 5 who go prepared for a party, and a party that will go on all night, and the others don't go prepared. They don't take enough oil for their lamps, and at that time, obviously, having a lamp at midnight was very important, so you could see. And bridegrooms tend to take great delight in surprising their guests and turning up at all sorts of hours of the day and night. So you had to go ready if you wanted to join the party. And there was 5 of them who didn't have any oil, and they went to the others and said, "Can we borrow some?" And they said no. They said no. They replied, "There may not be enough for both of us and you." The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the others were shut out. And the part of the point here is that faith is individual. It's not private necessarily, but it is individual. And you can't live off borrowed faith. You might have relatives or friends who are Christian, who are followers of Jesus, but you need to get your own oil, and you need to work it out for yourself. And it's really important. You are invited to the party, you are invited to the wedding, but it's really important that you are ready and you come prepared. Which again, Jesus is stressing throughout these verses. And again, Alpha is a great way for you to understand what it is you need to bring to the party, and what it is you need to come in and really be blessed. So I'd again encourage you to go on Alpha on Wednesday and start doing that. Then and then Matthew goes on in some other verses from verse 14 up to 30. He says, "Don't bury what you've been given." He talks about 3 servants who'd been given quite considerable sums of money, ranging from £1 million down to about £100,000. So they're not inconsiderable sums. But one of them, 2 of them invest it and do quite well with the money they've got, and their master's really pleased with them when he returns after a long time. But it says, "But the man who had received 1 bag went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money." And the point here is don't bury what you've got, and don't say you haven't got anything, and don't compare yourself with other people. Don't compare what you have. The amount you have isn't relevant. And don't say you have nothing, because you have gifts that you can use. You have abilities that you can use, and those have been provided to you. And those are God-given often abilities and gifts that you have to use in the service of others. The other thing is the view of God at this time, and the man who buried his money thought he was harsh. And if you think God is harsh, then you probably would bury the money and not try to rock the boat. But the important thing here was that his master isn't like that. The God I serve isn't like that. My God I serve is loving and generous and forgiving, and abundantly gracious and tolerant, and therefore you can risk things for him that you perhaps wouldn't normally do. So it's really important you get a clear view of God and of his character. And again, I would say, and I'm going to be like a cracked record on this, is that Alpha is a great way for you to understand what this God that we worship is all about, to understand his love and his grace. And I just encourage you to go on that at this time and find out what he is like. Then there's another parable Jesus talks about, and he talks about the sheep and the goats, but then he talks about people who have visited those in prison. They've clothed people, they've fed people, they've done some great works of service for people, and great sort of charitable acts. But they're acts that are sort of motivated by faith and hope and love. And what he says is, and he says that if you do those things, then those are a blessing not just to the people, but you're actually serving him. And he says this, he says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. The king will reply to those people who've done all these great things for feeding people and visiting them in prison and healing them. And you say, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And these investments of acts of faith and of hope and of love, they will pay off. And those are the things that last forever. Because Paul, in one of his letters, talks about this. He says, and it's a real famous chapter about love. He says now these three remain: faith and hope and love, and the greatest of these is love. And that's a motivation for behind a lot of those acts of service, those acts of kindness to other people. And just to find out how those operate, again, going on Alpha is a great way to sort of find out how you can serve and how you can bless other people. And I just encourage you to do that. Jesus goes on to explain in this passage that there is a separation that happens at this time, and it's the case in all of these examples, all of these parables, and in the example of Noah's flood, that it's slightly different to the Brexit vote, in that it's the Remainers who win. Or to put it another way, it's the winners who remain. It's the losers who leave and are expelled. So in the Garden of Eden, for example, where Adam and Eve are expelled from the garden after sin. In Noah's flood, it is those who have no regard for God and his ways who are swept away. In these parables, it is those who act in faith and hope and in love, who are the ones who remain and who benefit. And Jesus, it talks about him being present in his return. The name for it in Greek is parousia, which means to be present. He's actually present, and if you think about it, he's come to restore and renew his creation. He's come to restore the situation to what it was when God was able to walk in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. What he's accomplished on the cross is to bring heaven and earth together, and ultimately that will be the case. So, for example, the Lord's Prayer talks about your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Everything is geared towards reuniting heaven and earth, for God to have relationship with the people that he created. That's what he's all about. That's what his return is envisaging, that he will have a people who will be in communion with him, which is what he's always intended. So it is significant, this, and it means that things we do now out of faith and hope and love are matter. So as Nathan and Meg and Matt and Adrian have been encouraging us over the last few weeks to do those small acts of service, those small acts of grace and of love, those little things that we can all do, and the big things that we can all do. Those aren't wasted, because they're acts of love that will carry on. And that becomes a motivation for living. That becomes a reason for living, which people want. That what you create will last. Like that dinosaur print that little girl found in the rocks. They will last. They are precious. They are valuable. They are important. They are significant. And this creation is significant. So you can still, save the planet. You can fight for justice. You can save people. You can heal people. You can feed people. You can clothe people, because those acts are significant. And that's a motivation for living. So, Jesus will return in a blaze of glory, and he will restore his creation. You are invited to the party. You just need to make sure you're prepared and ready and got the right gear for a long party, actually. And don't let people steal that away from you. Don't let them take things away from you. And use what you've been given, use the gifts you've been given to bless other people, and in that you'll be blessing Jesus. And I should say, if you, it's the Remainers who win, but I would say to you, just find out about this. Go on the Alpha course, find out about this amazingly gracious God that we all worship, and just be blessed in all that you do. Amen.